Welcome to Self-Development Psychology. We have previously discussed two types of defensive thinking, rigid thinking and should thinking. In this lesson, we will talk about the third type of defensive thinking, absolutist thinking. I would like to start with a story about a dog with depression. This is an experiment conducted by psychologist Martin E.P. Seligman in the 1960s. Seligman, the former president of the American Psychological Association, is known as the father of positive psychology and has published many books on happiness. However, he gained fame in academia by studying how dogs develop depression. How did he conduct the study? He put two groups of dogs in cages A and B and gave them electric shocks. The cages were connected by an iron bar, so both groups of dogs received the same electric shocks. The only difference was that cage A had a lever to cut off the power supply, while cage B did not. Being shocked is very painful, so the dogs in the cages ran around trying to find a way out. The dogs in cage A quickly learned to cut off the power supply by pressing the lever, while the dogs in cage B could do nothing but wait for the dogs in cage A to cut off the power supply. Then, he put these two groups of dogs in cage C. Cage C had no lever, but it was low enough for the dogs to jump out of it with a little effort. When cage C was electrified, the dogs from cage A quickly learned to jump out of it, while the dogs from cage B lay in the cage, whimpering and enduring the electric shocks without moving. Learned helplessness is an abstraction of harm. Why did the dogs in cage B endure the electric shocks without moving? Was it because of the previous electric shocks? But the dogs in cages A and B received the same electric shocks, so why did the dogs in cage A keep trying to jump out of the cage? The answer is that the dogs in cage B not only received electric shocks, but also formed a belief that there is nothing I can do. It was not the electric shocks themselves, but the belief formed under the electric shocks that made the dogs in cage B give up trying. Seligman created a famous psychological concept to summarize the performance of the dogs in cage B, called learned helplessness. In fact, people often fall into this learned helplessness. For example, work pressure can make us feel helpless, thinking that no matter how hard we try, we cannot catch up with the work progress, so we give up and crash. Heartbreak can also lead to learned helplessness, making us believe that we will never find a good relationship again. Behind any avoidance behavior and depressive emotions, there is a shadow of learned helplessness. In this learned helplessness, we often think there is nothing I can do, which is what we call absolutist thinking today. So what is the essence of this absolutist thinking? It is related to human abstract thinking ability. This abstract thinking ability is good at summarizing rules and improving survival rates, but it is also easy to abstract the harm we have suffered and expand the defense range. Absolutist thinking is the abstraction of harm. It's a bit like planting a landmine in our minds every time we encounter something painful. This landmine is very dangerous and triggers our stress response when touched. So, to avoid contact with these traumatic events, we abstract the danger and put up warning signs in our hearts to mark the dangerous areas that should not be approached easily. The greater the pain we have experienced, the larger the danger zone we mark with warning signs. Over time, our own activity space becomes smaller, and we gradually have nowhere to go. For example, let's say there is a young man named Paul who has just graduated and started working at a startup company. Because the company is just starting out, they have to work overtime every day until late at night, and the boss is very demanding because of his own stress. After working for half a year, he was scolded by the boss many times and was fired. This is a traumatic event for him, leaving him with psychological shadows. What will he think? If he has suffered relatively little harm, he may think, I am not suitable for working in this company. He may be afraid to return to this company, which is a normal reaction. If he expands his defense range a bit, Paul may think, I am not suitable for working in a startup company. In this way, he excludes all startup companies. If he expands his defense range a bit more, he may think, I am not suitable for working in a company. Maybe I should take an exam for a state-owned enterprise or a civil servant. If he expands his defense range even more, he may think, I am not suitable for working at all. I can't handle the interpersonal relationships and work pressure in the workplace. Then his defense range expands to all jobs, and he may choose to stay at home and be a dependent. From this company I am in is terrible, to startup companies are terrible, to companies are terrible, to work itself is terrible. The greater the harm caused by being fired, the more abstract his beliefs become, the more absolutist his thinking becomes, and the larger his defense range becomes. Conversely, the more absolutist his thinking is about this setback, the greater his emotional response will be, and he will become more pessimistic and discouraged.